So, I'm back making Doctor Who videos for you all to enjoy. And if you're wondering how this video came about, well, I wanted to get you more involved in the decision making of this channel, so I posted a post, surprisingly enough, on my community tab saying, what sort of videos would you like me to do? And an overwhelming majority of you said you wanted me to do Classic Who stuff. Specifically, you wanted me to talk about my favourite episodes for each classic Doctor. So what I thought I'd do in this video is go for each classic series Doctor and list my favourite story of theirs. Now please bear in mind that my knowledge of Classic Who is by no means definitive, and this is just my opinion, so if your opinion differs, that's perfectly fine. In fact, in the comment section down below, I'd love to see your lists for favourite classic Doctor Who episodes, as I think it's an interesting topic to talk about, as there's so much classic Doctor Who out there. Also bear in mind that there are gaps, as I said, in my Doctor Who knowledge, particularly around the John Pertwee sort of era. So if your favourite isn't on here, then just bear in mind that it's my own opinion. But with that said, let's begin. So, the first Doctor. Now, there's honestly quite a few things I could put on here. And it's the Child 10th Planet. I really like the bits of Marco Polo that I've seen. Obviously, they didn't fully recreate it, so I don't know whether I could count that or not, I don't know. But for me, I'm going to go with the Daleks. Now, it's as cliche of an opinion as it is, the Daleks is basically the definitive William Hartnell story. You've got the dynamics between the Doctor, Barbara, Ian, and Susan, and you've got their clashing ideologies. Of course, the Doctor just wants to stick around and explore even though everyone else wants to leave. So he basically makes up an excuse by saying, oh, we need Mercury for the TARDIS. And it's like, he really just wants to explore, but I kind of love the craftiness of William Hartnell's Doctor in the earlier stories. It's something that we don't really see in any Doctors after this. So that's something I really enjoy. Obviously, the Daleks, in my opinion, are at, it's one of their best appearances, honestly, because over their time, particularly towards the end of Classic Who, they tended to rely on the tropes of the Daleks. Obviously, exterminate was a recurring thing. They just became very stale because until another story that I'll get onto in a minute, Terry Nation's scripts for the Daleks were always very sort of similar, they reused a lot of the same plot points and elements to them. But this story is utterly enjoyable and refreshing. I will say it's certainly better than the Doctor Who movie versions with Peter Cushing, which was actually the first way I viewed this story, funnily enough. I can remember being confused as well, because I can remember seeing a picture of the first Doctor and being like, okay, that's the first Doctor, and then I watched those movies and being like, that's not the same guy, and it's in colour. What's going on here then? But yeah, moving on, the second Doctor. Now, for most of you who know me, this won't be much of a shock. It's Tomb of the Cybermen. I absolutely love Tomb of the Cybermen. It's one of those stories that I've continually told myself I'll review at some point, but still haven't. And it's something I really need to get around to because it's one of my favourite stories of all time. Obviously, we've got the Doctor and Jamie's banter at its peak. We're introduced to Victoria. Obviously, I think we're introduced to Victoria in, I believe, Evil of the Daleks. But we don't have that story, at least not in full. So, on that basis, for a lot of people, this was their first introduction to Victoria. And I must say, even though she's quite simple, I do like her chemistry with the second Doctor, particularly in that one scene where the second Doctor, why did I say first Doctor? Probably because I was just talking about William Hartnell. The second Doctor is talking about how he thinks about his family sometimes, but they rest in his mind most of the time. And I think that was just a beautiful scene. And it was the first time, really, that I can think of that the Doctor mentions his family, and it's just a beautiful scene. Aside from that, though, obviously, as I said, we got Jamie, and we've got the Explorer Science Group, which I absolutely love. They're so quotable and distinct to a lot of the other scientific organization groups that we had. One thing that ages this story slightly is the slightly racist undertones that it has, with the European woman's sort of manservant, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. The Cybermen themselves, in my opinion, are at their best in this story. Even though I love things like Earthshock, they don't quite come close to the sheer fear that I felt when watching them in Tomb of the Cybermen. They're just so... They're so robotic but so human at the same time. There's lovely juxtaposition with these Cybermen, because you could certainly tell that they were at one point human, but the modulation in their voice tells you that they've been turned and transformed into something entirely different, and I just love that. Also, I really think this story benefits from being in black and white. I think it's one of those stories where the black and white actually helps add to the creepiness of the Tomb of the Cybermen, because obviously I always assume that things built by the Cybermen, i.e. tombs and ships, they're all very sterile. Any sort of creativity or emotion is entirely removed, because that's the Cybermen's main motif, obviously, is removing people's emotions. And I think black and white achieves that a lot better, because if it was in colour, you would feel more emotion towards the surroundings, I think. Whereas when it's black and white, you feel nothing, and I think it's just lovely. We also sort of get a recap of the main story thus far, basically with the Doctor saying, it's the TARDIS, it's my home. Or at least it has been for a considerable number of years. I'm sorry, that was a terrible Patrick Troughton impression. So this makes it a very good jumping on point for new fans. If you want to show them Classic Who, I would suggest this as a sort of jumping on point, as it basically introduces us to all the key characters and the key monster as well. A lot of people say that Classic Who drags. This is one of those stories that, in my opinion, doesn't drag whatsoever. Everything's just right. It's just as long as it needs to be. And we also get introduced to the Cybermats as well. I almost forgot that. But moving on, before I make this video entirely about Tomb of the Cybermen, the Third Doctor. Now, the Third Doctor is difficult because, as I said, it's one of those eras that I've not got much affiliation with, not much of a love for. But for the Third Doctor, I'm going to say the Three Doctors. The main reason is that I just love the dynamic between Patrick Troughton's Second Doctor and John Pertwee's Third Doctor. It's one of those clips that I revisit constantly on YouTube with all the Doctors coming together. And of course, sadly, it was William Hartnell's last appearance as the Doctor as well, so it's important for that reason. Obviously, I know the story itself isn't like the best Doctor Who story ever, but I think it's amazing just for the fact that it got those three actors together for one last time, and for that you've got to commend it, really. So moving on to the Fourth Doctor, I think a lot of you probably know what I'm going to say here. In fact, you could probably type it before I say it, but don't, because I probably won't read it. Genesis of the Daleks. I absolutely love Genesis of the Daleks. It's one of those stories that I revisit constantly because of just how fantastic it is. A lot of people say this one drags. A lot of people say that the 6 parts, I think it's 6 parts, is too long. It's too much. I wholeheartedly disagree. I don't think anything drags. And I think what makes it so compelling is the character of Davros, as it really is Davros' story. And it's similar to fashion to how in Infinity War, it's very much Thanos' story. This story is more about Davros than the Daleks. The Daleks are Davros' creations, but it's more of a character study of Davros than it is a Dalek story, and I just love it. Obviously, the Nazi symbolism for the Daleks is on full display here with Nyder, who I absolutely love. And what I love about this story as well is that in the original Dalek story, the Thals were very much presented as these perfect Aryan beings. However, in the Genesis, we basically get the polar opposite of that, where they're basically just as bad as the Khaleds, and I think that's a wonderful way of progressing the canon of the fight between the Khaleds and the Thals, while staying true to what you've already established. Yeah, it's fantastic. Obviously, we have what is, in my opinion, one of the best TARDIS teams on display. Obviously, I love the Second Doctor and Jamie as well, but Sarah Jane, Fourth Doctor, and Harry is so iconic. This story makes me wish that we had more Harry as well, just because of how much I like him, honestly. He's not that noteworthy in the grand scheme of things, he's not too distinct, but I just really enjoy his presence. But I will say I did debate putting Pyramids of Mars on here, just because I love that one as well, and I love Sutek, and I love the style it goes for. That's fantastic as well, but for me, Genesis just edges it out. And of course, we've got the best Davros as well, being Terry Malloy, who's never bettered, in my opinion, as the character, because what he does so brilliantly is that he has a distinct voice while still having hints of the Daleks in there, and that's what I love about his voice. Of course, it does help that he played the Daleks prior to this. He voiced the Daleks, I mean, so that makes sense. Also, I think the voice work by, I believe it was Roy Skelton as the Daleks in this story, I think the voices of the Daleks themselves are fantastic. I also love that the Daleks are just completely black instead of like the more multicolored Daleks we started to see in the Jean Pertwee era, because we went, ooh, colour, yippee, let's throw colours on the screen. Now, but these ones are just black, and I think that's really good war symbolism, to be honest, because in war you don't tend to see a lot of bright colours, so I think it's very fitting. And yeah, I just love this story, and I don't think a lot of people are going to disagree with me when I say that this story is one of the all-time greats. So the Fifth Doctor then. Now the Fifth Doctor, I sort of went back and forth between like four. I went back and forth between Earthshock, Resurrection, Caves of Androzani, and the Five Doctors. Now, the one I chose was Earthshock. And here's the reason. I think it's the most enjoyable out of those four. Granted, I will say, I think Caves is the best of those stories. Having recently watched it, Caves is the best of those stories. But in terms of what I enjoy more, I personally enjoy Earthshock a lot more. From that amazing reveal of the Cybermen to Adric's death, which I honestly welcomed because he did get on my nerves, to be honest, and I don't think anyone's going to pout because I said that. We also get, obviously not the best interpretation of the Cybermen, unless you're Wiki Media, but we do certainly get a great interpretation of them, a lot of callbacks to previous stories as well. It was the first time Doctor Who really got emotional as well, obviously, as I said, with Adric's death, and I think that's something you've got to commend it for as well. Yeah, I really like this one. A lot of people would have had others, maybe they would have said The Visitation, but I just like Earthshock. The Sixth Doctor then, another one that won't surprise you if you know me at all, Vengeance on Varos. Now, fun fact about me and Vengeance on Varos, I actually recently got it signed by the man himself, Colin Baker, and he is a lovely guy, although bizarrely enough he was in a Cyberman Hawaiian shirt, which was interesting to say the very least. But no, this story is just fantastic. I know I said that I prefer the less depressing things of I prefer less depressing things like Earthshock as opposed to things like Caves of Androzani. However, what I like to say about Vengeance on Varos is that it's comically depressing, because you basically got this Syl guy who you laugh at, but you also think, oh, what a dick at the same time. And it's just that fantastic contrast between this guy that you hate but also love. You basically hate to love him, or love to hate him, whichever you prefer. But this story is just fantastic. It has a lot of messages about the video analyses of the 80s, which honestly, I would argue the messages that this story present are even more relevant now than they were when they were taught, basically. Because you've got the whole idea of corrupt governments and elected officials and all these things. Reality TV, has it gone too far? Are we showing too much of people's lives? Do we enjoy seeing people in pain too much? Is there a sadistic part of us that enjoys this? You know, it gave, funnily enough, I think this story was a big inspiration on The Long Game from the Christopher Eccleston era, because I got a lot of those vibes from this story, but it's done better, in my opinion. Obviously, you've got the couple who are basically watching this, really excited to see what's happening, despite these people literally running for their lives. And I think it just goes to show how desensitized they become to violence, which again is even more prevalent now, with several people theorizing that we have become desensitized to violence, what with the regular broadcasting of gun violence and violence in movies and video games. It's certainly an interesting topic, and one that is thoroughly well explored in this story. The only thing I will say about this story is it does take a while to get going, with the Sixth Doctor and Perry. Basically, something goes wrong with the TARDIS and the Doctor tries to fix it, but then they figure out they need to go to Varos to get Zeton 7 for the TARDIS, which everyone else on Vengeance on Varos? No, on Varos seem to want as well. So yeah, once that part's out the way, though, the story is fantastic. You've just got to wait through that bit where the Doctor's like, oh, something to pass eternity with, I suppose. Again, more of my terrible impressions. But yeah, there's not a lot else I can say. I love the voting system. I love how corrupt everything is. I love how the laws are basically bent to favour those who are in charge. It's just fantastic. Seventh Doctor, again, this one won't be much of a surprise for any of you who know me. Obviously, for me, it's gotta be Remembrance of the Daleks. For the longest time, it was my favourite Dalek story. Until I looked at Genesis closer and went, okay. But it's still my second favourite to this day, I think, anyway. It kind of fluctuates between Remembrance and just the Daleks, because they're both brilliant. But this story is fantastic. It explores new ideas with the Daleks, mainly a Dalek sort of civil war, where some of them are loyal to Davros and some of them are loyal to the Emperor Dalek, I think. And the Davros's ones obviously are modified Daleks that obey him, and the Emperor's Daleks, the Renegades as they're called in the story, are not changed, not altered. They are pure Daleks, or what they like to perceive as pure Daleks, and as such they see the Imperial Daleks as impure because they've been modified by Davros. We've seen, we saw inklings of this in Resurrection of the Daleks, where Davros was basically beginning to tamper with Daleks to get them to obey him instead of the Supreme Daleks in that story. But this is where it really takes full force, and it's just fantastic. The Seventh Doctor and Ace, another great TARDIS team, are fantastic in this story. I really love the setting, going back to Coal Hill School. I love all the different characters. I love the army guys. I love the guy that Ace falls in love with, only to find out that he's a bit of an asshole. Sorry, that was a bit blunt, but it's the only way I could put it. Yeah, it's just fantastic, honestly. I love that Jeffrey plays an African waiter guy at a restaurant. That's just amazing, and it's something I referenced in my review of this story. So click that if you haven't seen it. I'll leave a link to all my classic reviews in the description if you haven't seen those, because I don't know how to do the iCard things. But yeah, this story, if you want my further thoughts on this story, be sure to check out that review. But I will say, just to make this video feel complete, it's fantastic and is well worth your time. And I'm gonna throw in the TV movie for this, mainly because it's the only thing of the Eighth Doctors that we actually got on screen aside from Night of the Doctor, which is more of a modern story than it is a classic story, whereas I believe the TV movie is more classic than modern, despite it introducing modern elements such as kissing and etc. But with that said, that wraps up all of my favourites. Again, let me know your favourites in the description, in the comments below. Also, if you guys want a sequel to this video where I talk about either modern stories or Big Finish stories, make sure that this video gets to 1,000 views, because I'm recording this basically during the editing process. This is kind of an insert that I've added in later on. And it's going to take a while for me to edit. So in order to make it worth me doing another one, please show your support for the video, share it with a friend who likes classic Doctor Who. Also, of course, I've got Twitter links at Thary'sYT. Comment, like, subscribe. Let's see if we can let's go for 10 likes. Let's be conservative on our first go for a new Doctor Who video. But with that said, I hope you enjoyed me talking about Doctor Who again, and I will see you